What's up, y'all? It's your boy, Marcus Bullock. Excuse me. Yo, I'm super excited about today's conversation. This episode of Marcus X is going to go down in history as one of the dopest episodes of Marcus X. I can't wait to jump into this conversation. We have an incredible guest tonight. My guy, Matt De La Peña. I can't wait for him to jump in. We're going to have an awesome conversation. I hope you guys jump into the comments. Make sure you ask him tons of questions. This is going to be so fire. Thank you so much, Matt, for joining us. This is going to be dope. So if you don't know who Matt De La Peña is, this is your opportunity to find out about an incredible children's author. And I don't know if I want to just call him just a children's author because he writes books for all types of young adults. It's so dope. He has so much amazing content. He's pushing out. He had books that were adapted by DC Comics, and young people are loving that. He has books for even really small children. In fact, my daughter, who just turned 7, she has a couple of his books. One of them right here, Milo Imagines the World. We got Carmela, Full of Wishes. I got a couple of other books that he is excited to talk about tonight, so I can't wait for Matt to jump in. This is going to be so dope. Yo, I hope y'all jump into the comments on this one because this one's going to be interesting. This is going to be an interesting conversation specifically because we just recently posted on our YouTube channel about the conversations with children and dealing with incarceration. So having someone like Matt hop in and have a conversation specifically around young people and how they deal with incarceration is going to be awesome. I can't wait for us to be able to jump in with him. It's going to be super dope. As soon as he jumps into the room, I'll let him in as soon as he requests to be able to join. So that's going to be fun. It looks like, matter of fact, it looks like Matt is in right now. He's in the live. So, Matt, if you want to go ahead and click on that plus button, or request to join inside of this video, I'm gonna let you in. We're gonna go live. It's gonna be fun. It's gonna be a great conversation. If you guys can't tell, I'm already super hyped. I think it's super important to have conversations specifically around parental incarceration and what that looks like. So this is gonna be dope. So this is where it's gonna be fun. Looks like Matt is looking for the buttons right now to join. That's always fun. Trying to figure out how to work Instagram Live. Oh, and by the way, if you guys have other guests who you think would be awesome, Marcus Ag's guests, please make sure you jump in our DMs, tag them. Our team will reach out to them. We probably want to have a great conversation with them as well. So I hope that you guys will join us there. Also, this video, as we capture this live conversation, we're going to repost this video. This video will live on our Instagram channels, but it'll also live on our YouTube page. So if you have not already done so, please make sure that you go subscribe to our YouTube channel to make sure that you can catch all of the amazing content that we're pushing out over there. We have awesome conversations, not only about incarceration, but what it looks like in order to be able to create reentry. So super excited for you guys to join and add your feedback to those channels as well. It looks like Matt's going to be joining us in a second. This is going to be dope. There he is. My guy. What's going on, Matt? How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you perfectly. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Marcus Ass.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Nah, hey, look, we have some books over here. Like, I'm super excited to jump in and start talking about some of these books, and most importantly, like the characters inside of the books. But before I jump in and start talking about all the amazing stuff, please take a few seconds to introduce yourself to our guests.
Yeah, sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Matt De La Peña, and I write books for young people. And as you heard in a little bit earlier, I write for older kids, and I write for the younger kids. So I write picture books and YA novels. And yeah, this has been my career for about 15 years, and it's a lot of fun, a big hustle, but it's great.
Now, I was looking at some of the books here that my daughter has. And she's already pumped about talking about some of the stories here. But I want to jump straight in because I think it's really interesting that you chose to leverage your skill set to be able to write around so many different interesting but deep topics, specifically around racial equity. You write a lot about incarceration, redemption. You have these interesting characters that go through life's challenges, and you write them in an interesting way. The illustrations are amazing as well, and we haven't even touched on the work that you're doing inside of the novels. Why is this so important for you to write about these kinds of topics?
Yeah, so I mean, I think I enter this territory from 2 points, right? First as a writer, but second as a parent. And I think, you know, anybody who writes for young people has to ask themselves this question, I think, like, what is the job for the person writing for the very young? Is it to tell the truth or to preserve innocence? And so each artist has to come up with their own answer to that. For me, I would rather err on the side of truth and just record the world as I see it. And then trust young readers, all readers, but in specifically young readers, to sort of figure out what to do with that topic.
I think it's interesting. I mean, one of the books that you have, Milo Imagines the World, specifically in that book, you write about a young person and like telling the story of them going to go into a prison visiting room.
Yeah.
Now, this is a very interesting topic here because we most recently had, we most recently published a video with myself and my daughter about her sentiment, her feeling about me going to prison.
Wow.
And what that meant for her. This character here that's going into the visiting room, can you please shed light on why specifically that topic around a child going to go visit their incarcerated loved one and all of the emotions that they feel, and then seeing how their lives are paralleled with someone on the bus and train right now. I don't want to spoil the book, with someone else who they would have never thought it would have been similar. Talk to me about that character.
Yeah, well, I'll just tell you first where the book started from. So a couple things are important. Like, I'm very interested in inclusivity, and I'm very, very interested in diversity and what that means. It's not just racial diversity. It's like these hidden diversities too, like, you know, the emotional state of a young person who has parents who are fighting, or a young person like Milo who might be going to visit an incarcerated parent. So I think it's important to share that this story is inspired by the illustrator of the book. His name is Christian Robinson. He grew up this same way with a mother who was incarcerated. We had worked together on 2 previous books, and when we were sitting down to talk about what we were going to do for the next book, you know, he looked at me and he said, you know, I kind of want to share how I grew up. What he didn't know is that, you know, after college for a couple of years, I worked at a group home, and this was always something that was very interesting to me. You know, what does it mean to be sort of put off to the side so that some people in the community could feel quote unquote safe? Like, what does that mean? You know, what does it mean that America has only 4% of the world's population, but 20% of the imprisoned population? I mean, these are staggering things to consider, but it's our reality. So once he kind of granted me permission to explore that, you know, that side of his experience, then I had to figure out, well, I don't want to make that the absolute focus of the story. It's going to be the undercurrent of the story. So what is the journey going to be like? And then I just thought about what I do as a writer, which is look around at the world, you know, sort of make these little stories in my head about the characters that surround us all, but then also be willing to be humble enough to revise those stories once you learn more information about these people, right? Because I always tell people, behind every face you see, there are all these stories that we don't have access to. And so we can't really know anyone until we sit with them, we get to know them. But so it's sort of challenging stereotypes. And I think Milo is sort of like processing that, the ability to be humble enough to revise your vision of someone, while at the same time, I'm kind of honoring his experience of visiting his mother. And then one last thing I'll share is at the very end, he shares a very special picture he made of his family, and it's for his mom. And he actually is doing what I do as a writer, which is he's sort of not drawing a picture of what his life is like today, but what he hopes his life will be like tomorrow. And when I write a book, you know, I used to think it's my job is exclusively to record the world, but now I think, well, I don't want to just write what I see. I want to write what will be seen. And so once you put a story into the world, you know, that now is part of the fabric of young people's lives if it's read by them.
I mean, this is interesting because there's some complexity there where it sounds as if not only are you writing for young people so they can have a window into another world or a developed perspective, but there's interesting conversations that may also result with parents as a result of the writing. Was that intentional when you were developing these storylines?
I mean, I'll tell you the truth. You just hit on the head probably the most important thing to me as a person who does picture books, which is this. I think books at the end of the day are just a vehicle to conversation. So sometimes those conversations might be between a parent and a child. And by the way, there's nothing more beautiful than that conversation with that kid who's sitting in your lap exploring a book, right? Those, whatever it may be, it could be a funny book, it could be a book where the topic is serious, like Milo. So it might be a parent and a child, it might be a teacher and a student, it might be two peers. And then one other thing it might be is just a conversation that a child is having with him or herself, right? Like, so they're thinking through the book. One thing that I think is really important about picture books is that there are different entry points depending on who the kid is, right? So that's why I never want to be didactic. I never want to start with a message. I want to start with a character and allow readers to figure out what they think about the character's journey. It's not my job to tell you what to think. It's my job to just sort of show you this character and their journey, and then you figure out what to do with that, right?
I mean, you do that so incredibly well. Let's swap over to one of the other books. We Were Here.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
So now we have Miguel here, right? And Miguel, I think Miguel is like 16 years old.
Yep.
Miguel's going into a juvenile detention center. And then Miguel ends up developing relationships with two very interesting people here. You went from a child and that dynamic around parental incarceration to now having someone actually in the cell. Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about that leap.
Well, I think, so I did work at a group home for a couple of years, and it was after college, and I played basketball in college, so I would play basketball with the residents, and we'd talk trash and have so much fun, and like, you know, it was...
Could you hoop? Can you hoop, Matt? Can you hoop?
Hey, I mean, look, I was Division I. I got a scholarship.
Okay.
I knew I wasn't going to play pro, but yeah, it paid for my college. It allowed me to be the first in my family to go to college.
Wow.
But, you know, I'll tell you, like, We Were Here is a special book to me because I think, like any counselor, I went into this job thinking, wow, I'm going to change these kids' life in like a week, you know, like that idealism. And you realize the job, the best thing you can do for that kind of job is to just show up, you know, and be steady and maybe model good decisions or thinking about aspirational thoughts, you know. So anyways, that's where it started from. And then one of the pivotal moments in We Were Here, which by the way is my favorite book I've ever written.
Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of special to me, but I think one of the pivotal moments is Miguel, he steals the files from the group home center. Like he steals them before they leave the group home and try to like escape, right? And he carries them with him. And throughout the first half of the book, he's trying to decide, should he read his file? Should he read how the system defines him? And he knows that that's going to be different from who he really is. And, you know, it's just this, to me, like the most powerful idea is like he decides not to read it and he buries that file, which I think kind of suggests the way I look at it, right? Nobody can tell you who you are just because of, you know, circumstances or decisions you've made or mistakes, right? Like we all deserve the ability to redefine ourselves to ourselves, but also to the people who are looking in at us, right?
Yeah, I think that that's an interesting dynamic there. I love that. Um, with Miguel specifically, I think that's a very interesting point about him wanting to bury his own file and what that means.
Yeah,
There's so many pieces. There's so many things I can glean from that. Right?
yeah,
I'm wondering, is he hoping to bury it so that no one else sees this thing? Is he hoping to bury this for himself so that he can be he can reimagine what he could potentially be or what he thinks that someone else wants to be. It's so many ways we can go with that.
yeah,
But with young people that are reading a book like this, I think this could be interesting because I think that there are so many people who, even whether or not they're in a facility, detained in a facility, or just going to their high schools, right? They're dealing with the same potential perception of what other people are seeing in themselves. How are you being thoughtful about the way that when you're writing, or how are you being thoughtful about how you're messaging this to young people and how they can kind of sort of create their own world where they hope to get people to perceive them the way that they see themselves?
yeah. It's a good question. I think like one of the coolest things about reading is that I believe it's the ultimate form of empathy, because you care so much about these characters who can do nothing for you back. They don't know you exist, right? They're just in this book. They're not real, you know what I mean? But you care so much about them, and that's such an interesting place to think about storytelling. So when I create a character, here's like, this might sound surprising, but the most important thing I have to figure out are what are the things about him that he doesn't want anyone to know, because that's what makes us human. And so that's what makes a character feel real. So I like to think about those opposites, like what are you proud of and what are you ashamed of? And so if you tell the truth about a character, or you allow the character to tell the truth about themselves, I think that's where readers might connect, because every reader has a feeling inside of them of something they don't want the world to know about them. And when you see it in a character, it's like they're handing you their vulnerability, and therefore you want to support them. So I love that. And as a reader, that's what I look for too. One of the first books that really, really moved me emotionally was The Color Purple. Why? Because in these letters that the protagonist was writing, I just felt like she was being so honest, and she was telling me about where she didn't think she could measure up, or where she didn't think she was good enough. And it just makes you reassess your own self-definition and might maybe be more generous to yourself. So I think with We Were Here specifically, I hope that readers see this male character who's dealing with a lot of machismo and trying to act tough. I hope they can see through it early. And then, of course, near the end of the book, he just reveals it. Like, he just tells the truth about himself. But I think it's fun to watch that journey. And again, I go back to the thing I said about picture books. There's no safer place to experiment with these feelings and ideas than in reading a book.
Yeah. It's interesting. I talk all the time about how the power of storytelling can create empathy in others. I often, go on stage and I talk about my journey from prison to entrepreneurship, and what that means for me, my family,
Yeah.
all of our customers that we support, the family members, the people that are in the sales, knowing that like I'm the before and they're the after, right?
Yeah.
And if I continue to tell these stories, well, even here in DC, where on Capitol Hill, all of policy and legislation is being designed and built, I believe that real policy decisions happen at the dinner table. They happen when we share the stories and have a different conversation, and then folks take it back and they develop their own personal policies, and then they can go out and then now try to figure out ways to be able to build this space of humanity, and we can all change the world together. I was looking in the chat and I saw someone talked about the book Mexican White.
Oh, yeah.
Now this one is interesting here, man. And I know I'm going in. I want to talk to you about what you got coming up next, but I gotta give the viewers what the viewers want. I want to tell Mexican White Boy here. Now this one talks a lot about race and identity, and specifically the criminalization of people of color.
Yeah.
What do you think? Why did you write about this specific story, and what is the correlation between that and the criminal justice system for you?
So I think, well, it's funny because I hadn't really connected the two, but yeah, the father in Mexican White Boy is in prison. Um, it's funny. I hadn't really thought about that and connecting it to Milo and We Were Here, but yeah, so the father's away. But the most important thing that book is dealing with is racial identity when you're biracial. So I grew up with a Mexican father and a white mother, and sometimes you don't know how to define yourself. And I think that book in particular is just one version of the mixed experience. And sometimes I'll meet kids on the road and they'll say, oh, that reminds me of my life. That's how I felt growing up mixed race. I didn't know how to define myself. But then other times I'll meet another kid who's half Mexican, like I am, and he'll say, oh, that wasn't my story at all. It was very different. And I think it's important, like, to kind of go back to that idea of like the danger of the single story, because there is no one version of growing up mixed, just like there is no one version of somebody who was imprisoned at one time and now has their own business, right? You're telling your version of that story, but going back to what you said, the power of story. When you do speak about your experience, it's so empowering to so many people in the audience, if maybe they have a connection to that story, or if this is an opportunity to learn about a different experience. You know what I mean? Like, I used to think books with diverse experiences should exist for the kids who can identify with them. But now I see it different. Now I see it as an opportunity for somebody, from an outside perspective, to come in and start to understand a different story from somebody who grew up very different from them. And I think if you put both of those together, that's like the richness of storytelling. Some people are going to identify it's a mirror, and for some people it's just a window into a different experience. So I know that you touch many people who can identify with your story, but I bet you touch a lot of people who just have no experience with that.
I think it's interesting. I mean, one of the biggest correlations that end up happening that I hear when I get off stage is around my mom and what she did for me when I was in prison, and writing me letters and being determined to ensure that I saw hope after prison, and the value that provided for me, obviously. But what people hear when they get on stage is like, yo, my mom would have done the same thing. Or
Yeah.
as a mom, I would like to believe that I would be able to have a level of commitment to my child the way that your mom did for you. And I think that that's an interesting dynamic that folks have to grapple with while they're listening to me. And I would have never planned for that, because essentially I just want to be able to try to figure out how to erase stigma for folks that are coming out of incarceration.
Yeah. Well, isn't it amazing how powerful the presence of a great parent can be? Like,
Yeah.
I had a great mother too, and like I always tell people, she's the reason I try hard at life. And I just think there's something about having at least one parent who looks at you like you can be somebody. And I think it doesn't matter how much money you have growing up, that's the most important resource, I believe, for young people.
Yeah. What do you think is the biggest? I mean, you write a lot about these very complex topics. What do you think is one of the biggest misconceptions, specifically around people in the criminal justice system?
So why do we put people, like, if we do have such like an outsized number of the imprisoned population in this country, why are we doing that? Well, we're doing that, to be honest, so that the people who are living in regular society can feel more comfortable, because, oh, I now don't have to worry about that threat. But what people don't understand is the people who are pushed off to the margins have the same desires and hopes and dreams as the kid who's sort of in the comfortable spot, right? So We Were Here is called We Were Here because at one point, one of the characters writes, Mom was here. And then the other character says, I was here. And it's called We Were Here, right? We want the world to know we exist. And I think that's beautiful. Like, why did I want to feature those kids in a book? because we don't really see them very often. And I think it's important to sit with them and to understand what they want out of life and who they want to see them. For instance, one of the characters is sick, and he just wants the world to know he existed before he's gone. Another character, he's very religious, and one security guard told him, you know, God can't see you when you're in prison. And so he's so worried that God can't see him. So he wants to be seen by God. But then my main character, Miguel, he committed this crime that was actually an accident, but he did, get sentenced to a year in a group home. And he just wants his mom to see him again, because the accident that he, was part of, it really affected his family. And his mom is having trouble looking at him. And so he wants her to see him again. So I just think that would be the biggest misconception, is that we maybe treat the people we've sort of shoved off to the margins like things, and not we fail to honor their humanity sometimes.
Yeah, that's dope. Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for that. Are there any other organizations or people that you enjoy learning about or collaborate with, that you think that folks should know about, specifically dealing around either parental incarceration, the justice system, or children that may be dealing with some of these very complex issues?
I will tell you, I'm gonna blank on the names, which is very unfortunate. Cool. But I'll tell you about two experiences that I had that were really like life-changing for me. One of them, I was in Minneapolis, and I got to meet with mothers who were incarcerated. By the way, this is like 8 years ago. And I got to sit with them while they recorded themselves reading Last Stop on Market Street, which is behind me, to their child. And the book was sent home to the child with their recording. And I thought that was such a beautiful program. And then the second one, I did a really cool podcast with some people in the UK, and it was all about incarcerated parents in the UK. And I'll never forget that, because it was very artfully done, and people were spending so much time on making a good product for the people who were going to ultimately listen to it, who were imprisoned. And I thought that was a beautiful program. Yeah.
I mean, I definitely know that you're a guy who can appreciate really good products. So I definitely see that. Definitely see that out of you. What do we got? What do we got coming up next? What's up for next for Matt?
Well, I got to feed my kids, right? So there's always got to be a new book. I have a couple of books coming out. The one thing people don't realize about writing books is that it takes them a while to come out. So usually when I finish the book, it won't be out for 2 years.
Wow.
So so I have 3 books coming that are done. So I'm working on a book that will come out in 2026. But so sometimes when a new book comes out, I have to remind myself like what it's even about. So I have a book called Perfect coming out. I have a book called Home. And right now I'm writing a book about a middle school kid who's really good at basketball. So it's a novel, and he has to make a decision. And I think this will hit home a little bit, but he has to make a decision. He has an opportunity to play for this really fancy school away from home and live away from home. Great opportunity. College coaches are going to scout him. Or should he just go back home where he'll have fewer opportunities, but he could be with his family? So he has to make that very difficult choice between family and aspiration, which I think a lot of athletes end up having to make.
Dude, my son is 12 years old. He plays AAU basketball. And we talk often right now about what his future is going to look like as we think about what high schools he's going to go to. And then he specifically wants to go to Duke. And I'm like, yo, dude, we live in DC. Like, so, how are we going to do? How are you going to navigate this new town where you'll be by yourself? And here comes my wife talking about, we're just going to go get a house in North Carolina. We're going to go get something out there.
Oh, yeah. By the way, okay, 2 things come to mind there. First of all, Duke's my favorite team. I could tell you all about their new recruits. I watched them in the McDonald's game. But then also, isn't that interesting when you have to learn how to code switch going from your community to Durham? Like that's a huge shift, and that's part of the learning experience of a young person. Like how do you switch codes in this new environment, but stay true to yourself at the same time.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man. Man, you're full of wisdom. I'm so grateful for you taking some time to join us on this edition of Marcus X. This was an incredible conversation. For all of you guys, thank you guys for joining us. Some of the things that you heard from Matt tonight were not only about the books that he's written. If you haven't gotten any of his books, go back, rewatch it, and I think I talked at least about 3 or 4 of his amazing books. Go capture them. If you have small children, I think it's a great opportunity to be able to introduce very complex conversations, because sometimes we struggle with that. At least I know I do. Like, how do I open up the door for these conversations, and where's the maturation level lie within my child to be able to try to figure out how to articulate what they're even thinking or feeling as a result of now absorbing this new content, right? When we absorb this, it becomes a part of us. The characters become a part of us. When Miguel goes in and he starts to develop these relationships with the counselor and the officer, like, they become a part of us, and we want to try to figure out how they're going to navigate it, and we're learning how he's going to navigate the relationship, and we're wondering if we would do the same, right? I think it's very interesting how Matt talks about how the storytelling and building empathy can help change the world. As you guys know, it's one of the things that we work hard to do over at Flick Shop, and I'm grateful for yet another data point that talks about the importance and value of even ensuring that children become a part of the conversation. One of the other things that you heard about from Matt is, like, logistically how hard he has to work as an author to be able to tell these stories, and then the years of planning and probably distribution and marketing tactics it takes in order to be able to get these books in front of us. What it does is it shows the commitment of so many people inside of our community that want these stories to be told and understand the value and importance of it. Matt is investing his life in this work, and I'm super, super grateful for that. Matt, I'm grateful for you. I'll give you the last word to give to our viewers before I let you go off and go figure out a way to work on the next project.
Yeah, well, I'll just say, like, thank you for your journey, and thank you for giving back and trying to reach out to the community. And then I'll just tell any parents out there, like, my theory is we can't always keep our kids from hurt or harm, but we can hold them through it. And I hope that's what my books do, is help you hold them through, difficult topics.
This is dope. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much, Matt. This was an awesome conversation. Hopefully we'll have you back when one of the next books drop.
Sounds great.
We'll complete this conversation.
Okay, thank you.
All right, have a good one. See you guys. Have a good night. Thank you for joining us for another edition of Marcus X.